Welcome back to Gaza. You can probably hear the call to prayer, the last call to prayer of the day. The lights have gone out, the sun has gone down. You can't see much here because the only mains electricity is on for 4 hours, and the little light that people have is because of generators. That is one of the aspects of the economic blockade here. Now, Washington is hoping to reboot the redundant peace process that has neither peace nor process by sending its Secretary of State to the region tomorrow. He's going to Jerusalem, he's going to go to Cairo, to Amman, to Ramallah, but he's not coming here to Gaza. Why is he not coming here? Because Hamas does not recognize Israel, and America has put Hamas on the terrorist list. That's why he's not coming here. But in order to really understand what it feels like to live here, to exist here, you do need to be here, and we've been here since Friday to have a glimpse of what life is like. The sky is blue, but the sound is unnerving and never-ending. Israel's drones, its permanent eye on Gaza, all seeing but unseen.
You hear it all the time.
The drone?
The drone you can hear.
I can never see it.
I don't know, but you hear it all the time.
Dr. Abu Jamal is Gaza's most prominent psychiatrist. Every one of the 2.2 million citizens living here are potentially his patients. And the Israeli army drones, which see but can also kill, are a trigger that destruction is always an option.
A lot of the population start to link what happened now to what happened in 2014, to what happened in 2008. And we all the time say that, we are exposed continuously to cues, to things that remind you of the previous traumatic exposure, right. Traumatic events.
You can never escape your past.
So, yeah, exactly. Your past is already in front of your eyes. When you keep hearing the drones, you are in Gaza since Friday, and I'm sure that you heard how those drones are loud, and that they are reminders of the people that you were attacked.
There is, of course, no shortage of visual reminders after the last escalation. In Gaza, a place periodically bombed back to the Middle Ages while relying on outside help.
We are humans, we suffer, we struggle, we are under pressure, severe psychological pressure.
Do you feel like a doctor and a patient?
I felt helpless. I couldn't really help my children. I couldn't tell them that this is a safe place. I couldn't tell them that there is no chance that we might get killed. I cannot say that because it's impossible to say like this.
And as a doctor, that must be so frustrating.
It is so frustrating. It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating that it's happening. We are educated. We are mental health specialists. We are health practitioners. We understand what does it mean to commit all of those crimes in front of the international community, and it continues for 11 days, So the pain is not only because of the bombardment, but the pain and the suffering because of the silence of the international community.
The piles of rubble become shrines before they're cleared away. This was Dr. Abu Al-Ouf, Gaza's head of internal medicine, and this was his house. He was killed together with his wife, his parents, and his 12-year-old daughter. 3 generations, 1 airstrike. Bashir lives in the building next door. He was watching television in bed with his wife when the bombs struck.
Boom, 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 boom. The house
Shaking.
shaking. I take my wife and sleep.
You get down to the ground.
Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. There, die.
You thought you were going to die?
Yes.
By the way, Dr. Abu Al-Ouf was also in charge of Gaza's main COVID ward. The fight against the pandemic is not going well here, unlike on the other side of the border. Israel, of course, prides itself on having vaccinated 2/3 of its population. Here, less than 5% have received their COVID jabs. And although this wasn't a direct hit, the collateral damage on the Ministry of Health here has had a huge impact on Gaza's ability to combat the pandemic, because this is the only place where they can process tests for COVID-19. Israel's recent escalation here is, of course, payback for the rockets fired by Hamas. But long before the latest round of fighting, Israel turned this place into an open-air prison and crippled its economy with a blockade. The fishing fleet of Gaza is confined to port because the fishermen of Gaza are not allowed to fish their own waters. The never-ending cycle of destruction, rebuilding and abandonment happens in a place where everyone feels as if they live at the mercy of others and their machines. You can see it in their eyes if you look close enough. Now, we tried to get someone from Hamas on the program tonight, but unfortunately that proved impossible. In a minute, we'll be speaking to Paul Hirschen from the Israeli Foreign Ministry in Tel Aviv. But first, my guest here is Asmataya. She's from the We Are Not Numbers project here in Gaza. And that project is about young Palestinians telling their stories. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
So what is the story at the moment, the story of the ceasefire?
So actually the word that would describe the situation right now is confusing, because there are so many negotiations and talks about a permanent ceasefire, but at the same time we are not hearing about any terms on the ground. So the situation is actually getting worse for the people here in Gaza, as they're thinking of the possibility for the Israeli attack to come back at any moment. So they're trying their best actually to stay strong, resilient and hopeful that they went to the streets today to start rebuilding Gaza. But at the same time, they're feeling nervous about all of this and trying to just understand what's going on with nothing given to be understood actually. And I would also say that the situation here, I mean, especially if we have a ceasefire actually, that doesn't mean that the Israeli attacks impact would end, because there are so many Israeli Palestinians injured during the Israeli attack, and now they are dead. And at the same time, with this huge amount of destruction, we don't know what to do, how to rebuild Gaza again. And also, the people are traumatized. They're doing their best to understand what's going on, but at the same time, they are having a really bad time trying to process what happened and what's actually going to happen. So with all of that said, I can say that Gaza is just unlivable more than ever nowadays.
But if Hamas doesn't fire rockets into southern Israel, there won't be any airstrikes from Israel against Gaza, presumably.
No, I don't think so, because there were so many times in which we had Israeli attacks without us starting all of this.
I mean, the economic blockade, which exists without the actual fighting, how difficult is that to deal with as a Gazan?
It actually impacts everything that you can think of. It impacts the way you live throughout your day, the way you even decide when to have a shower or not, the way you would start to at least plan for your future, the plans for also the future of your sons and the next generation. Everything that you can think of, water, electricity, internet, everything is affected.
But don't you think that Hamas should recognize the state of Israel, because that would make it so much easier for some kind of dialogue to take place, and Hamas is in charge here?
Well, why don't they just recognize us as a Palestinian state and start to have negotiations with us to have peace instead?
Okay. Asmataya, thank you very much indeed. Okay, well, let's go to Tel Aviv and talk to Paul Hirschen from the Israeli Foreign Ministry. I'm not sure if you heard that interview there, Mr. Hirschen, but what is the point of the economic blockade against Gaza if you want this place to be viable, if you at least rhetorically still believe in the so-called two-state solution?
Matt, good evening. Hi, thank you for having me here. Yes, I did hear most of the interview. And I want to say that the human suffering on both sides of this conflict is precisely the reason why we didn't want to be in the conflict in the first place. Every time I hear of a casualty on both sides of this conflict, I am sickened. You ask about the economic blockade, and I think it's a little bit disingenuous of you, because I think you know very well there is no economic blockade. What there is, which has been ruled legal and legally implemented by the United Nations, is a naval blockade. On the economic front, with the exception of during the course of hostilities, which was 11 days, there has been almost completely open border. As a matter of fact, one of the great problems that we're facing is the fact that...
I'm sorry to interrupt, but the Gaza Strip is effectively closed off. It's like it's an open-air prison. The fishermen can't fish in their own waters because they'll be stopped by the Israeli Navy. You can't just leave the Gaza Strip without going through one checkpoint, which can be, closed at whim. You've got drones in the sky above you all the time. It is effectively an open-air prison. How would you like to live in a place like this?
Matt, I know that you repetitively use the term open-air prison. This, of course, is not true. The responsibility for the suffering in Gaza lies directly at the doorstep of Hamas. We in Israel are not going to take responsibility for choosing the leaders of the Palestinian people. If you think that's what we're going to do, then I will say to you that that's a little bit paternalistic of you. This is their responsibility, and they will take
But not everyone here is a member of
Hamas.
And therefore what you're doing here is effectively collective punishment. You're punishing the people of the Gaza Strip, 2.2 million of them, for the fact that they've elected Hamas. Is that fair?
Matt, I think they elected Hamas for a 4-year term 16 years ago. And you're actually touching on the real issue here. This is not something about us. Israel in this particular conflict is a theater, a stage on which internal Palestinian political fighting is taking place. There was an election called, there was an election cancelled. This was choreographed by Hamas in order to exploit the internal political dynamic within the Palestinian society. I don't think that you are saying to me that we are going to sit back and allow them to fire 4,000 rockets deliberately into civilian neighborhoods in Israel. And I'm
talking about ordinary civilians here, of which many have died in the last 11 days before the ceasefire was called, and will continue to die. This is a form of collective punishment against the ordinary citizens of Gaza, who are not members of Hamas.
You know, you continue to say that, and you know it's not true. This is not about punishment. This is about deterrence. And the responsibility for the suffering,
well, it feels like it
sickens me, lies directly at the doorstep of Hamas. They initiated it. They choreographed it. They wanted it to happen. You know that they targeted humanitarian aid that we were sending into the Gaza Strip in order to prevent the reduction of human suffering. Your glorification of Hamas, a terror organization which you yourself, the British...
It's not a glorification. I'm sorry. I'm just talking about ordinary people in the Gaza Strip. But I'm sorry, we've run out of time. We're going to have to leave it there. Paul Hirschen, thank you very much for your time.